Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Frank and Stan chat. This is edition number 259. And anybody watching on video will notice that we have a colleague, Steve Wren, with us. Hello, Steve.
Morning, everyone.
Morning, Steve. Yeah, Steve and I share a little bit of a history together. Not sure if we worked together or were there at that time. I'm not sure we were, but
No, I don't think
we
we
have
were.
a similar path. So some of the experiences Steve is having at the moment, I experienced about 10 or 12 years ago. But anyway, we'll get on to that. So, Steve, welcome. Do you want to give a little summary, a taster of your career and what you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, I'll give you the potted version. I've been a head of maths at a secondary school down in Cambridgeshire, and we were quite innovative. We were quite successful as a team. So I've got a chance to be a county maths advisor part time and lecturer on the middle years PGC at Cambridge University part time for a little bit as well. And then we moved north. And I was senior leader, assistant head in charge of data, because that's what you do when you're a maths teacher. It's that cliched first step. But ultimately, took on teaching and learning, was seconded to be a deputy head at a local school who was struggling a bit, to be honest. And then went back to my home school, for want of a better word, as director of Key Stage 3, head of law school type job, so responsible for everything across year 7, 8, 9 in transition. And then my eldest daughter was about to start at the school where I was doing that
Uh,
role. And as a year six, she thought it was really cool that daddy would be doing assemblies and all those things. I suspect as a year seven, she might have been a bit less cool about that. And then Ofsted got in touch and said they were recruiting HMI. Had I thought about applying? They were building a thing called curriculum unit. Obviously, we're looking for a national lead for maths, and I'd had contact with Ofsted over a number of years about a number of issues and off call on the DFE. So I applied for that. I'd never been in OI, never inspected a
right,
school.
right.
It wasn't something on my radar, but thought that sounded interesting. So we became HMI, Ofsted's National Lead for Maths. But obviously, Ofsted weren't inspecting, so this was COVID time, so it was 2019, 2020. So I got seconded to off-call for 6, 7 months. So if we remember that CAGs hadn't gone very well,
Yes.
so I was seconded to off-call to work on the following year. And the time exams were still going to happen, if we recall. So I worked on what became the reserve paper solution for, most students in the country do the A-level geography, but this school can't because their bubbles collapsed.
Yes.
So I worked on that. And then, of course, was it Omicron or one of the other variants that we're all trying very hard to forget came about. So that didn't happen in the end, having spent all that work. But yeah, and then went back to Ofsted as HMI and Ofsted's lead for maths. So did some inspecting, as you would expect. Wrote Ofsted's subject report for mathematics with Hannah Stoughton, primary colleague and very, very valued colleague. And my last 18 months did that alongside being Ofsted's policy, quality and training team. So trained inspectors, wrote training materials, delivered training for OI and HMI. Did some work on the new ungradeds when the ungradeds changed. And then obviously did some work on the new framework and chose to leave in September. That's probably the polite way to put it.
How have you
I
found the
think I think if you're in the band, it's creative differences. I think if you leave a band, isn't it? So we left through creative differences.
Yeah, I had creative differences, but actually, it's sort of like it was an amicable departure. I think yours was as well. I mean, in a way,
Yeah, no, I mean it's lots of good friends there.
yeah, yeah,
Lots of things that I think that they're going in the right direction. But some things that for me were things that I wasn't fully behind, if I'm honest
yeah,
with
yeah,
you.
yeah,
And the opportunity arose to step away and do some consultancy work. So I do 2 days a week now for a large multi-academy for a medium-sized multi-academy trust as director of standards. And 2 days a week I do consultancy work, maths typically, but not only. And then 1 day a week. And Frank, no disrespect to anyone else who I ever work with, my Fridays is the highlight of my week every week. So I do voluntary work. Our local village has a wildlife trust. We manage like 5 reserves around the village, and I volunteer with them. And every third week, adults with special needs come and do some work with us as well, which is stunning. And I'm currently writing a paper on the best sites for putting bird boxes in nature reserves because we have say 5 reserves and we have bird boxes in them all, and we have like a records over 10 years of which ones have been used each given year and their aspect and their height and all sorts of things. So trying to work out are there any patterns about where we should be placing these in future.
Wow, wow.
So you got that statistical element comes in even
Yeah,
when
it
you're doing
does.
voluntary work.
Hey, go on,
I'm
Stan.
just interested in your amicable left leaving Ofsted because I thought when your daughter started at your secondary school, you could have argued that you left there to have less time with your family.
Yes, yes, there is something like that. There is something like that. She's now, I mean, she's gone through that now. She's now at a different sixth form. It was interesting that the headship at that school came
Oh,
up about 6 months ago. And lots of my former colleagues were saying, "No, you should apply for that, Steve. You should apply for it, Steve. You'd be great.
Yeah.
We've lost our way a little bit. We'd love to have you back," type thing. But my youngest daughter is now at that school, and I mentioned
Right.
it to her. I probably can't repeat in polite company the response I got in terms of even me raising the possibility of applying. I was never going to, but that.
have you found the
That was
transition
quite
out of
amusing. Her response.
have you found the transition out of the inspectorate? I mean, I found it quite
You
tricky.
know what? I've actually not found it tricky. I think the thing that I used to find frustrating as a HMI is that element of you felt like a doctor going in saying, "I can see you've got a broken leg. I'll see you in 4 years to see if you've
Yeah,
mended it."
Mm.
And I found that quite frustrating not to be able to say, and actually, these are some things I've seen elsewhere or have you thought
yeah,
about? And of course, you shape it through some of the questioning and like what I love now is a lot of the work I do now is I'm still going in and helping schools identify where things aren't going as well as they want them to. But I can then talk about actually these are things I've seen or these are things we want to try. And I don't know your context well enough to say you should do X, Y, or Z, but these are some things you might want to consider
yes,
because obviously you're in there as a consultant for a day or two
yeah.
max.
I
I mean,
do like that.
some of the projects I'm doing are like 10 days over the course of the year, so you sort of do get a closer handle on those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I do like the idea of being a bit circumspect, in a way, because I just feel as though, like you, there are times when you just don't know the circumstances of the school well enough. And that's not just about the area in which it sits, but the staff dynamics, the
Yeah, and the politics,
carer dynamics,
is
the
it a new
governing
head who's just
dynamics.
come in who's having to make her or his own, reputation first before they make some of the changes, or is it someone, you've got really long-serving staff that are hard to move and you're having to make smaller
Yeah,
steps. You can't possibly know that as a consultant going in. And I'm always worried about people who came into my schools when I was a leader and said, you should do X, Y, and Z.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
And you don't know it well enough.
No, no, no. Yeah.
I
Also,
agree.
it was also a sense of have you been around the block enough for me to think that this might actually be based on quite a lot of experience and evidence? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's not about being youthful. That's just actually about the range of experience that people have when they come to advise you or support you.
Yeah.
Um, Stan, this is a weekly chat, so we have our what's caught your eye this week. So, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, two things, both related to Ofsted, really. The first was I saw a clip somewhere where somebody had asked about the well-being and paused inspections and how many inspections had actually been paused as a result of the well-being of the head teacher. And that data isn't published. And I don't even know if it's collected or if
Yeah,
it's analysed.
yeah.
So as a result of that, because I didn't get very far with that, I'm putting together an FOI to ask for that information to see if that's held and if it's analysed.
I think we know it's not. I
Well,
think, but
well, the way I've written the FOI, there'll be some consequences of saying no, we don't, because I want to know how they then know
yeah,
that that strategy is working. And
yeah,
if you don't collect the data and you don't analyze the data, you can't possibly know whether it's working or not.
yeah. Did you see what I wrote about that? Have you read what I wrote about that? To me, it was like you've got the provision, right? So you've got the helpline, but actually, what are the outcomes from that helpline? No one's thought about. They've thought, oh, we've got a helpline. Oh, yeah, that's great. Nobody's bothered to ask. Are we asking about well-being? Is that a key feature? Is there any follow-ups to any of the conversations that are had? Because I'm hearing of heads who have called the helpline, and then some of that's have been around about delaying the inspection or sort of like pausing the inspection, and that's gone on for much longer than was anticipated. But then Ofsted haven't bothered to contact the school to keep them up to date as to where everything's heading. So there's that sort of sense of Well, the helpline's there, but actually we're not really. We've got the helpline.
And I think I know we'll come to my what have I noticed in a bit, but I think for me there was, the HMCI, Sir Martin Oliver said something in for the Education Select Committee the other day that it hadn't occurred to us to. It's like it almost feels like they will have a log somewhere of these calls, but it appears not to have occurred to somebody to have a say, actually, let's once a month, let's just have a
Yeah.
summary of, this many calls were made from this many schools and X% related to staff well-being and so on. So you can get that picture of are things declining, are things improving. It just didn't occur to them, I think.
Yeah. So my next sort of thing going on in my head, because I'm generally, especially now I'm not working in a school, I'm more rebellious than I was when I was a head. And I thought, well, what happens if people just don't take part? If what's the legal bits and bats of it? So the legal thing is Ofsted can come into your school, they can look at documents that they're entitled to, they can talk to staff, and that's just about where their legal um, requirements end. So the inspection itself, to run properly, requires compliance on behalf of the professionalism of the staff. And there's been, I think it was like 300,000, just over 300,000 inspections, and there's less than a handful of cases where schools have not or have suggested they're not going to comply. So it's like 99.99%
Mm,
compliance. And it just makes me think, was there a way we could have resisted some of this as a profession earlier and molded it more than it has been? Because I just feel as though we're just running out of control of it completely.
mm.
I'm not suggesting schools do this. I am definitely
Just
not.
the Che
And
Guevara of.
if I'll say if I was ahead, there was no way I would do this. So I'm not suggesting that for a minute. But it's when you actually look up what that it's causing a lot of stress in a lot of schools, and yet it's running by compliance. And
Mm.
without compliance, it couldn't possibly run.
For a second there, Stan, we were getting T-shirts made up with your image on the front. We had T-shirts with a black image.
No, no, this is the daft thing. I actually agree with inspection. I
Yeah.
think inspection is really important. And I agree with the framework that we can work to, but there are bits of it that I can't agree with. And the current framework, it's the absolute fit that I can't agree with, because for me, that takes away from really skilled inspectors the nuances of understanding what's going on in the school.
Well, Stan, I read an inspection report the other day, and I wish I'd printed it out. I could have read it out now, but it talked about behaviour being exemplary and students being older students being role models for younger students. And you read all of that about behaviour in the behaviour and attendance grade. The grade for behaviour and attendance needs attention because their attendance wasn't above national and it wasn't improving quick enough. So if you're one of those parents who just clicks on the cover page,
Mm.
Yeah,
sense of behaviour needs attention, you're going to start thinking about behaviour is not good. But actually, when you read the report, which I think we all know only a fraction of parents do, it was behaviour sounded absolutely awesome. I mean, they actually
yeah.
use the word exemplary in there.
Yeah.
You're talking about
A good inspector with the freedom would have written a paragraph that sort of split that up
yeah.
and put it in the proper category.
And that's it. And, because you had that holistic view, didn't you? What's the
Yeah,
right judgment, taking all the evidence into account? I've been through three inspections under this new framework in our trust, and I've got to be really clear. They've all been managed really well by the
Yeah.
teams, and they've applied the toolkits faithfully and accurately as the toolkits have been written. And that's what you would want, isn't it? You don't want
yeah,
individual
yeah,
teams going rogue. But there was the element of have we I'm paraphrasing. They didn't use it, but have we ticked off that bullet point? Have we ticked off
Yes.
that bullet point? Have we ticked off that bullet point? And I think at times, in all three of them, it felt like they were losing sight of the big picture of the judgment area and just getting bogged down in we haven't really got enough on that second half of that second sentence in that third bullet. And that's not what inspection's about for me. Inspection's about
no.
that big
And
picture stuff and that
and I do
holistic
think
view.
a vast majority of inspections are managed well.
Yeah.
I really do. But that for me that would be the most frustrating as a head teacher, especially the example you've just given, where it misrepresents in the judgment what it's saying in the text. And in my time in Ofsted, if the text didn't match the judgment, you
Oh
would
God,
the
you were all
judgment
over
anyway.
that. That was a cardinal sin. I mean, the thing is also, I had this. I mean, I understand where the scorecard or the report card is, but that grade, those colours are going to stay there until there's another visit from Ofsted. You know, so it's not as if it's like something that's just a temporary blip. You know, like your exam results may get better year on year on year, and that report card will convey that hopefully. But actually, these are set in stone until somebody else from the inspectorate comes in to change it. You know, I
The
think.
answer is to
I mean,
base the scorecard on the data, the current data of the school, or the most recent
Mm.
data, and have one scorecard for the last inspection, just
Oh, I see. As a separate one.
inspection.
Yeah,
So it does change and it does reflect how the school is.
I mean,
Because
it is one thing I think is better in the new framework than the old. That if you get any needs attentions or lower, you go into that monitoring program. And
yeah, yeah.
the number of schools in that monitoring are going to be vast. I mean,
That's
45%.
I
Somebody I
know,
read
I
the other
know.
day. And okay, the first one's a phone call after 6 months, and then you're discussing. Then they'll come after 12. But actually, if they come in and they see that you've use a good northeastern word, fettled. If you've fettled that thing, then actually they can change the grade on, and that section will be rewritten. So I do think that's an improvement that you haven't got that
Yeah,
situation where you think about the old methodology, the old you'd go and do a monitoring visit, and unless they were moving out of a category, then the report stayed as it was. But
mm,
actually, it might be that four of the five things that put them into a category had been sorted, but
yes,
one
yes,
wasn't. When you write the nice letter saying you've done a lot of great things here, but you're still measures, or
yeah,
you still.
yeah,
Whereas actually, now you can go and say, actually, you've sorted that. We'll rewrite that bit.
yeah,
Sorted
yeah,
that. We'll rewrite
yeah,
that bit. That bit's not sorted yet. That stands. I think that is an improvement on the old framework, and I think
yeah.
although I said there was differences about the framework, I think there are positives in there, and it's important to
Mm.
reflect those
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well. I think
yeah.
that is a real positive step. As long as you in there, you've got sufficient tariff and time to genuinely look at that thing
Yeah,
and not
yeah,
just do a skimming surface.
yeah.
Um,
We're on Ofsted. So, Steve, what's caught your eye this week?
Yeah, well, it's probably not this week. My last week has been fairly busy in the sense of I've been organising referees for a football gala. So
Um,
700 matches I had to organise referees for a youth football gala one weekend. So frankly, that just dominated my whole week. That week before that. But I'm reflecting on Sir Martin's time in front of the Education Select Committee, and we were talking there about that box ticking and that secure fit, and one of the things that I think was a weakness in the post-consultation response was where they put attendance and behaviour back together. Certainly, everything I saw on social media, school leaders and stuff I was talking about, at the time of the consultation, were really positive about those two things were going to be judged separately. And Sir Martin, he was at a conference, wasn't he,
yeah,
a while ago, and he said that putting them back together was something that had worried him and it bothered him greatly. And actually, he'd only done it because of pressure from the sector and organisations in the consultation. But it worried him greatly, and he was going to be watching it closely. And then he was in front of the Education Select Committee week and a half ago, wasn't it now?
yeah. Week last Tuesday.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and he's and
last
he
Tuesday.
and he and he was asked, well, actually, what proportion of those schools who have been graded negatively for that area is it because of attendance, and which is it because of behaviour? And he said, "Oh, I haven't got that data. It's not occurred to us to look at that." And if you're that bothered about something, you'd have thought that actually you'd have had been all over that as an organisation. Um, Now, because I'm a data geek and I do these things, I'd been tracking that just in the background. And there's 84 schools, secondary schools, I need to be clear, I'm looking at secondary schools here. 84 secondary schools had been graded needs attention or urgent improvement for attendance and behaviour. And of those, 65% of them, when you read and I've read the reports for each
Yeah,
one, 65% of them, it is absolutely clear that attendance is the issue and behaviour is fine. The attendance would have been graded needs attention or worse, and the behaviour would have been graded expected or better. 65% at the time that attendance is dragging them into that category. Only I thought the figure say only 5% of times is it behaviour is the issue and attendance is fine. And the other ones are either they're both a worry
Yeah, yeah,
or the report is a bit cuspy when you, because you have not got access to the evidence bases. So, it's like that might have just snuck into expected or might have been the extension. But for 65% of them to say, actually, it's attendance is the issue,
yes,
not attendance and behaviour. Well, those schools, like we were saying before, they've now got this badge that says your attendance and behaviour needs attention.
yeah, yeah,
Parent on the surface, and often reports are for parents, we keep being told that
yeah,
they're going to be getting that misleading image of what attendance is like in the school, behaviour is like in that school. And I said that school that was talked about exemplary behaviour, role models,
yes,
has got a big orange dot next to attendance and behaviour. Um, so to me, that's something that that worries me that we're giving it parents potentially misleading information.
yeah,
And I think that what also ties in with it, and it's something that just hasn't really been aired anywhere, that not only did they put them back together in the consultation response, the attendance bit changed out of all recognition. If you look at the attendance grade descriptors in the consultation response, it's all, as Martin has said, it's about, are you meeting your statutory obligations?
are
It's
you,
about, are registers done? Are you following up with external
yeah, yeah,
agencies? It's about process. And actually, you only really got into the data element of to get into strong.
Yeah.
Whereas actually in the final version, it's data, 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 data. Is attendance above national?
national,
Yes, no. If it's not above national, is it improving? Is it improving for all groups?
mm,
And at no point did they consult on a version of the attendance toolkit that is just data driven.
yes,
And I was talking to a head a few weeks ago who their report hasn't been published yet, but reading between the lines, they're going to get needs attention because obviously they can't tell,
yeah,
needs attention. And he was talking about the fact that they were really put through our behaviour. And they said, this is what the heads told me. You've got to take that with a due amount of caution, don't you?
yes,
You've got to be careful. But he said, the lead inspector told me, you're doing everything you should be, but because your attendance isn't above national and because it's not improved enough, I can't give you any more than needs attention because it'll be thrown back in quality assurance. And actually, that doesn't serve you as the school or me as an inspector. And I remember under the old framework, they changed it a bit after post-COVID, where there was a line that asked if schools are doing everything they
everything,
reasonably can,
yes,
then they should not be penalised for da 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 da. And it just feels like we've lost that element
mm,
of if schools are doing everything they reasonably can, as that head was telling me just the other day.
Again, putting a legal thing on it, who's responsible for attendance? It's actually
Parents are
yeah,
responsible
yeah,
for
yeah,
sending
it's
their
not the
kids into
school.
school, aren't they?
It's actually technically it's out of the school's control.
Yeah.
mm, mm.
And you like this one, Steve. When Frank and I first inspected in 1995,
Oh, those were the days.
the
Yeah, a
attendance
great
data,
Was it all
descriptor would
black
have
and
been
white in those days,
a
guys? Was it
great
all black and
descriptor
white?
would have been helpful.
Bit of sepia.
the only data we had that was national and comparative was attendance data. There was nothing else.
Yeah,
That's post-COVID years, that wasn't it?
And I'm fairly sure it was around about 95%.
It was
yeah,
really interesting reflecting on post-COVID because obviously we had those couple of years without any published data, didn't we?
Yeah.
And again, I think you guys have already picked up. I like a spreadsheet, and one of the things that I did was, I was going out, I was inspecting, and I was, and you're inspecting quality of education, which is, our pupils learning, and I kept a little spreadsheet of all of my inspections, and then I actually, when published data did come out, which might have been 12 months, 18 months later for some of them because of when I started, I was looking at the outcomes compared to actually the judgments I'd made, and in the vast majority of cases they were accurate. The schools that you'd said, I mean, I
yeah.
remember one primary school I inspected, and it was just stunning. It was absolutely stunning. And I remember, we graded it outstanding quality of education as a team. But there's all that element of doubt of, I hope when these results come out in 18 months' time, I'm not going to be left with egg on my face.
I
And,
know. Well,
but they weren't because actually I think you can, if you're spending time with kids looking at the books, talking about their learning, if you're spending time in lessons, and spending time with teachers and leaders talking about maths or geography or whatever it might be, you can get a real sense of actually, are these kids genuinely learning this
yes,
stuff,
yes,
rather than it just being, I'm going to look at some exam results down the line. And I think at the moment, the real skew onto just data in terms of achievement and attendance. Sometimes it's too easy and out. The school who are getting decent results because, to be frank, they're gaming the system
Yeah.
will get away with it now.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I don't think they would under the old framework. I know
Yeah.
the framework had flaws. I'm not saying it was perfect.
No, and the proportion of parents who are able to afford additional tutoring for their children, I mean, that's a big issue where I live now.
Yeah.
And so, in effect, it would be wrong to assume. I don't know the quality of our grandchildren's maths teaching, I don't. But actually, it would be wrong to assume that that's all down to the school, and some of those results in some of the local schools are incredibly high, now. It'd be wrong to assume that those maths departments are fantastic. They should be used as examples of best practice around the country. That certainly isn't the case.
Well, Frank, when I was the head of maths, when I was a county maths advisor, I was linked up with a school who were struggling. The head of maths was early in his career. He was acting head of maths because the head of maths was off long-term sick. And I remember I spent a lot of time with him at his school, and he came across to ours for a few days. And I remember him just saying, actually, our jobs are so different. So, you've got a team of really experienced staff, which brings its own challenges.
Yeah.
But he had a team of short-term supply.
Yes. Yes.
You've got parents who are banging on your door with unreasonable requests. I can't get parents into a parents' evening.
Yeah.
And we both have the same job title, but our jobs are so different. And I think we're going back to context that we talked about earlier. And I think, Ofsted are bringing this similar skills approach in, and I think that's something that might help that a little bit. This is not perfect, but it might help that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think though, I've got 2 points I want to pick up on, but before I do that, I'm just interested in terms of the importance of having been round the block a little bit. I've raised that before. You said there about, well, it's fairly easy to see, the direction of travel of a department, for example, a maths department, when you've got stuck into it and you can feel it. But actually, in order to feel that, you're actually comparing it against some of your own efforts, in some of your own. But actually, if you're quite narrow in terms of your experience, I think that's actually much more difficult to get a sense of that. And that might be where some inspectors are relying a little bit too heavily on the toolkits as the way out, for them in order to get
Like a safety blanket.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's been some discussion about the difference between feedback, and it picks up on your attendance and behaviour issue. Yeah, so inspectors giving quite positive feedback, gets in a way will give you all the positives and gets us in the cars away and whatever. The gap between the feedback and the actual published report or the draft report that comes through, I've heard heads feeling as though there is just a complete disconnect between those two events, and that may be that they've been overridden on QA, and they actually write it far too positively and it gets knocked down before it's sent to the school. Where do you sit with this? Is that an issue that you find?
It's not something I've heard massively, if I'm honest with you,
Yeah,
but I think QA is a really interesting thing because I have, if you've never set foot in a school, it's really hard to read someone else's. You could write some notes on a visit to a school, Frank, and I could read them. I'd have a sense of the school,
yes,
but it's very dependent on how good a note taker you are. And of course, if I'm being honest about myself as an inspector, my note taking probably wasn't the best
no,
because other aspects of
yes,
my role were strong. The building relationships and digging and knowing where to ferret for more information and where to not. I think it's very hard for someone who hasn't set foot in a school to know what the right thing to write is, and it's something that I feel quite strongly about more generally. People talk about having an independent complaints process for Ofsted. I absolutely think that would be the way to go. I absolutely do. But I don't think that body should have grade changing power
right,
unless they find a procedural flaw. But
right,
actually, if it's a judgmental flaw, I think they should have the power to annul the report and instruct Ofsted to go back in and
yes,
Or,
say,
or return the report to Ofsted to the original inspector.
yeah,
Uh,
potentially. But
and
what they
say
shouldn't be
that,
able to do is overwrite a grade.
yeah,
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 And I think that's also true of Ofsted's internal quality assurance processes. I don't think someone should sat in an office in Bristol or London or whatever should be able to change a grade for an inspection in Manchester when they've never set foot in the school. They should be able to say to the lead inspector, we don't think this stacks up.
yeah.
They should be able to recommend gathering additional evidence, but I don't think they should be able to say, we are changing your grade. And I was speaking to a head the other day, I'm going to be very careful how I phrase this.
Yeah,
Speak to a
yeah.
head the other day who is in a very difficult situation at the moment. They've had an inspection and they were happy with the outcomes. Um, and they then received a phone call from a senior HMI saying, your grades have been downgraded under quality assurance. The person who's downgraded the grades has never set foot in that school. And the head teacher said to me, I asked them, how do you know it's not just bad note taking rather than a faulty judgment? And Ofsted could not answer that. And for me, the well-being for that leadership team, going back to that well-being conversation you
Yeah.
talked about earlier, Stan,
Well, it's back to
it,
that argument, isn't it? A lack of evidence isn't a lack of standards.
yeah.
If you in writing up your evidence base haven't written it deeply and thoroughly enough, that shouldn't impact on the school.
Because you
If
might not have done that because you're spending more time gathering the
yeah,
evidence.
yeah,
I want to dig a little bit further here to make sure that
yeah,
I'm absolutely nailed on. And therefore, I'm going to write 2 or 3 sentences about what I've seen, whereas I could have had a real skim and written a lovely paragraph. And
yeah.
it's like, well,
Yeah.
actually, and for me, yeah, I just don't think that someone who's never set foot in school should be able to make a
Oh,
significant
I
change,
agree.
like, yeah, tweak a word, pass it back to the lead inspector and say, I'm not sure on this, but
Yeah,
not
it's
to
funny
start thinking, I'm going to overwrite.
On
when
reports, Frank, just going back to what you said
yeah,
before, I can vouch as a governor. In an outstanding school, I sat through the most positive feedback you could ever wish to have, and I mean, I was so proud of every member of staff in the school and the work that was being done. The fact the early years was, the suggestion was they should go and show that practice to other schools. The report, bland.
mm,
Nothing, it does say outstanding, it does, but nothing about it has the colour or the descriptors that were in the feedback. And I would say to schools now, get permission to record the feedback.
I,
I
I,
mean, they do feel like painting by numbers reports now.
Yeah,
yeah,
And I think it's because, I sort of get why people are afraid to write anything flavorful. Because something someone says, oh, that school down there got outstanding, or that school down there got strong. They did this, therefore we've got to do that to get strong. And
yeah,
we've all seen those schools who say, well, we've taken that thing from that school who got strong,
yeah.
and that thing from that school who got strong, and that thing from that school who got strong, and therefore we'll be strong. And actually, all those things just don't work out of context, or they're
My
clashing
favourite,
against each other.
Steve, for that is a school in Lancashire with 35 pupils, and I was going through their SEF with them and saying, you've got department in here. You've only got 35 children. You haven't got a department. Oh no. I borrowed my husband's Seth from his secondary school at the
With 1,500. But I do think so. I think it's almost become a case of people are afraid to say of anything in
yeah,
case schools it becomes Ofsted want.
yeah,
I think Ofsted have perhaps gone down that line a bit.
yeah.
I think I
Well,
reflect on my early reports to my later ones.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I was only there 5.5 years, 6 years.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, the thing is, when I started in as an HMI, as I say, with Stan, we were seconded heads for a year in 95, 96, and we both carried on inspecting. But when I became an HMI in 2001, I should state I joined a department, well, I think it was department, of about 50 quality assuring HMI. I had done way more inspections than any of them. So when I came, I would spend a week sitting in the head office in Ofsted on a duty desk, and our role was never to challenge the process or the inspector. The lead inspector would phone up if they were putting a school into special measures. They had to phone, but many of them would phone up just saying, "I've got a difficult judgment. Can we just talk it through?" It's a little bit like the Samaritans to a certain extent, where you're not really telling somebody how to behave or how to, what to do, but actually just talking through the problem. Many inspectors would say, "Oh, that's really helpful." You never gave them, all you were providing was an outlet
Yeah,
for them
no,
to talk.
I used to sit on duty desk as well, and it was a case of, I'm not in the school, I can't make the judgment for
Yes,
you, but these are things you need to be thinking about in terms of, and oh
yes,
yeah, that's a really good point. I'll go and dig into a bit more into
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
And that's what it should be. That's, I mean, that's obviously in the culture assurance team, but it doesn't feel. What you're not doing is I've put a school into, I've called a school expected for this, and then 5 weeks down the line, someone's sitting there going, I can't.
I can't see that.
That third sentence in their evidence base doesn't look like it should be expected. It should be,
yeah.
it needs attention or whatever.
Yeah, what the
That's
funny
my
thing.
concern around that is that um, if you're going to make a judgment on a school, you have to have set foot in the school. Is maybe whether you're an independent complaints arbiter, whether you're a quality assurance team in Ofsted or whatever it might be.
I agree. Yeah, I was going to mention about there's a feeling. I think somebody said there's, the issue that you raised about Sir Martin Oliver not knowing, and the issue that Stan raised about well-being. It's about being inquisitive. And I think that there is a little bit of delivery of inspections rather than being inquisitive about what are these inspections actually telling us. I think you can get into the business of delivery too much to the extent that you sometimes forget that you are still there to advise Parliament on the quality of schools and what's going well and what isn't. Yeah, I'm
I
not
mean, it's a
sure.
massive, massive job.
It
If you
is,
look at
yeah,
all the things that HMCI is responsible for, prison education,
yeah.
social, it's mammoth, and way beyond my pay scale. But I'm not sure whether that's actually doable by anybody
No,
to have that breadth of knowledge, and then you say have the time to be inquisitive
yeah,
about
and I
it.
think it's in. I'll get onto my
And
part.
don't pretend you can. That would be
No,
my thing.
but also
Say that's too big a job.
yeah, it's really interesting because and it's not just Sir Martin Oliver. I think this goes back to everybody. Who's been chief inspector. When they're sitting in front of the select committee, they're often with two senior colleagues. But the chief inspector, from my memory, they never treat the two colleagues as equals. So, like last week's, it was all Sir Martin Oliver. Then Lee Houston had a few words to say. Then the director, responsible for social care and regulatory work, had a few things to say. I've forgotten her name, but
Yvette, Yvonne.
yeah, and you think, well, just treat them all as equals. Say to Lee, this is your
This one's
bag.
yours, mate.
This is your
This one's
bag,
yours.
mate.
Yeah.
I'll defend you. I'll support you, but you do the talking. And it's as if the chief inspector is the one expected to know everything, which, as you say, is impossible.
Yeah, and nobody can, and that's not a failing of Martin. I think that's a failure of the system, isn't
System,
it?
yeah.
It's also a failure of leadership because
Well,
if you think you are the only person who can answer those questions, or you're the only person with the knowledge, you are wrong. And there are people that you should be consulting with and saying, actually, I'm not sure about the answer to that. I'll just
yeah, Lee, what have you got
let
to
my
say?
colleague
Well,
here.
the thing is,
And Lee's going,
yeah,
I don't know anything about that. I thought you were going to answer that one,
passing it
Matt.
down the chain. There's some poor schmuck sat on the third row back in the audience. But I don't know if I've got the answer to that one. But I think that's the art of leadership, isn't it? Knowing what you don't know is often more important than knowing what you do.
Yeah, yeah,
Because otherwise you can fumble around stuff and actually end up making a bad decision rather than saying, actually, you know what? I'm not the expert on that, but I've appointed people who are.
yeah,
And
yeah.
The
actually,
one that gets me, and we'll finish on this, I think, is when they ask prime ministers, do you know how much a bottle of milk is? And they go out of the way, and instead of saying, no, actually, I don't, because nobody goes and buys a single bottle of milk.
You know,
So, no, I don't know the answer to
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Move on.
But I do know how things are going in Ukraine at the moment,
Yeah.
and I've got a very good relationship with Zelensky, and
I
we're
know how
putting
much the
up.
milk costs in Ukraine.
Yeah, yeah. I can tell you now, they probably haven't got a daily delivery at the moment in Kyiv, but whatever it may be.
I think I'd be saying to them, I don't. Do you know how much a £5 of potatoes is? Because
We're
they've
back
got
and forth
Don't
they've
about
ask.
this
obviously got
milk
Don't.
cost.
Let's get
they've
off
got the
this.
milk one written down, haven't they? If they're interviewing you asking how much a
Oh
pint of
yeah,
milk, they've
yeah.
got
I've
it
got my
written down.
bread. I've got my milk.
So you've told them something they haven't got
Right,
written down.
right. What's caught my eye this week, and it's been a bugbear for the entire year, because on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I go around to take some of our grandchildren to school. Parking, okay. It's a primary school. It's in a cul-de-sac. All right. So, and there are buses because it takes kids from. It's a Catholic school, so it takes it from three parishes, some distances away. Very narrow streets. There are no parking markings on all of the roads, but basically everybody ignores it unless a traffic warden comes along. So what I noticed last week, there are two head teachers there, an infant and junior school, and they in effect take it in turns to walk the street to try and encourage people not to park. And you think, no, 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 no. Head teachers should be on that gate, which is what she was trying to do, welcoming the children, speaking to parents and carers about any issues that might be around. But no, she's having to go knocking on doors of cars. I've no solution to this whatsoever, other than just wanting to highlight the irresponsible parking of a small proportion of parents at those two schools is affecting the safety of everybody.
And that's the reality. It's no parking for everybody else, but I'm allowed to because I'm
I,
in a rush
Yeah.
or
Steve,
whatever it
don't
is.
get me onto the SUVs that seem to view themselves as having special parking rights down here. It's not your micras. It's not your sort of
It's
little
your
minis.
tanks.
It's your tanks. It
Like
is.
I remember
25 years
speaking to
ago,
I remember
I
speaking to a
I had
head
that problem.
once, and it was the same issue that you talked about there, Frank. That they said. So I said to this parent, actually, you can just park on that street up there. There's some on-street parking, and the parent said, "But that's where I live." And actually, they were driving such short distances. I mean, you've talked there about drawing from a large area. The primary school that my kids went to draws from quite a small area. It was, it's based in a village, and it draws from basically the villages either side. So probably half, three quarters of the kids could walk very easily with a parent because it's
Mm,
Yeah.
obviously they're still little, certainly the younger ones. But actually, there were people driving probably like a 3 minute drive,
yes.
and it's just, I don't get that. I don't get that on a day like today where it's gloriously sunny here and I can see the sun streaming in your house as well, Frank.
Unless they're
Um,
going on to work after that, unless I'm dropping the child and then I'm off,
Yeah,
I'm
but
on a longer journey.
don't
I,
don't
you're
Stan, do not
charitable, Stan.
well,
You're
try
listen,
and
charitable.
be the
I
friend
I
of the
had this
people who
problem
park badly.
25 years ago, and I had one day of the absolute and utter delight. We had one parent who insisted on parking on the double yellow lines, and even though the other parents would ask him to move and tell him he was causing danger, nothing did. And then one day I was looking out, and there was a guy I didn't recognize. And he walked up to the car and said, "Will you move your car, please? You cause it." And he said, "No, who do you think you are?" And he went, "Plainclothes police officer."
Oh, that's quality.
It was the only time it happened, but it was absolutely superb.
Oh,
Yeah.
penny,
Well,
penny to have a photo of that face as he
yeah, yeah.
look at
Hey, can
that
I,
car.
as we bring it to a close, can I just say to those two head teachers, thank you for continuing, even though it must be an absolute pain, going out there, at the gate every morning, trying to do something about this. Yeah, I know it's an impossible task, but I know that one of them for sure does watch and listen to the chat. So thank you so much for what you
And
do for your
sometimes,
kids.
Frank, heads do try and make a difference. And then, I mean, I had a parent, I think it was a childminder, who picked up about 8, 9 children in a minibus. And when that minibus parked outside of school, nobody could get. So
Yeah,
I gave her permission to drive into the school and pick the children up in the school. I got more abuse from parents saying, "Well, why is she allowed to come into the
I
school car
know.
park and we aren't?" You
The
just
problem, the problem you end up with is that the more who drive irresponsibly and park irresponsibly, those who want to walk no longer feel it's safe to. So
Yes,
they
Yeah.
end up driving because they don't feel they've got a choice because they don't even get their kids safe. So it just becomes this like never-ending circle
yeah.
until everyone's
Particularly if
driving,
they
even on the
drive,
corner.
particularly if they drive SUVs.
Yeah. So we've got Stan with his t-shirt on,
No,
barricade the
mine's
doors.
going to
Got
be
you
a
with your anti-SUV t-shirt on. I'm actually find my own slogan t-shirt now, and I'm away.
Steve, can I thank you so much for your time this morning? It's
I know it's
been a
flown by.
really,
Thank you for having
really
me.
enjoyable chat. And
Right.
yeah, again, with all these chats, Stan and I gained so much from listening to and chatting to our amazing guests. So thank you very much. We have one more chat before the academic year ends, and we have Dame Kathy August on next week with her co-writing author. So she has a new book out in the autumn where they've actually interviewed, I think it's about 40 or 50 senior colleagues, quite snappy interviews, and they've summarised what the key 3 points of the interviews were. So it'd be interesting to see. That includes Michael Gove, Sir David Bell, all the
Wow.
usual. I was going to say culprits, but the usual characters, that you'd expect to see. But anyway, until next week, and thank you, Steve. Love to have you on again if you're up for it.
Yeah, really would.
Yeah, it's been
The chance
brilliant.
to talk about education, you try and stop me.
And good man. All right. So until next week, thank you, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye.
Yeah.